Hello, everyone. My name is Trevor Moody. I am currently a graduate student in the T. Denny Sanford School of Social and Family Dynamics at Arizona State University. Through their online program, I am pursuing my master's degree in family and human development. I received my bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Colorado Boulder in 2013 and was fortunate enough to start this program in January of 2015. As part of a finalizing aspect of this master's program, I have been given the opportunity to create and present what I feel is very valuable and relevant information that everyone can ultimately relate to. As you can see, the topic of this presentation is adolescent addictions, consequences of excessive internet abuse. As someone who has grown up during the initial phases of the technology and social media boom, I feel very strongly about knowing how such technology can affect me as well as those around me. This subject, I feel, is very important in today's society, especially when considering all the advancements technology has made and will continue to make in the future. Furthermore, the increased accessibility with which today's youth have to this technology, I think, is crucial in understanding how such abuse of the internet can ultimately take place. This presentation aims not only at introducing the topic of internet addiction, but also the relationships and many different facets it can have with adolescents. This includes the common types, the underlying factors that increase the likelihood of an adolescent becoming addicted, major health effects, and finally the various treatment or coping strategies that can be employed to help those who suffer from this addiction. Something I think is important to keep in mind throughout this presentation is one's own personal use of the internet and whether or not such elements of use within your lifestyle fit into this addictive category. Perhaps asking the question, does the criteria being covered overlap at all with your own participation with the internet? Keeping this in mind, it may ultimately help in identifying how not only learning capabilities, but also dependency issues among adolescents will continue to change and manifest through such excessive use. With that being said, I thank and appreciate you taking the time to view and listen to this presentation and hope it provides meaningful insight into the topic of internet addiction. To begin, it is important to establish a clear-cut idea of what internet addiction is and also what it can represent for individuals in today's society. In doing so, I believe it not only helps preserve the general meaning of what internet addiction is, but it also helps to convey its increased potential to represent so many different things for so many different people. Research has defined internet addiction as being a disorder in which an individual's inability to control his or her use of the internet causes marked distress and or functional impairment. Furthermore, it has been seen to create psychological, social, educational, as well as employment difficulties for individuals. Although the preferred term can be regarded as internet addiction or internet addiction disorder because it identifies the parallels that exist between the overuse of the internet and other relative behaviors of addiction such as substance dependency, it has also been known as compulsive internet use, pathological internet use, and internet-related addictive behavior. Two main frameworks or approaches have attempted to identify and interpret internet addiction. The first recognizes it as a behavioral addiction. Basically, excessive use of the internet can be seen as a high impulsivity issue, mainly sharing features with that of drug addiction, including tolerance, withdrawal, craving, loss of control, and relapse. Furthermore, internet addiction resembles that of gambling disorder, which many researchers have identified correlating symptoms including having both urgency and the lack of perseverance, or the ability to remain focused on otherwise hard or mundane tasks. The other approach highlights internet addiction in relation to passion theory. Passion in this sense is defined as a strong desire towards an activity that people like, that they find important, as well as something that they invest both large amounts of time and energy into. Internet addiction then is something that research finds as a consequence of such an obsessive passion. Research also finds two distinct forms of passion, which help in explaining why such obsessions may occur. Harmonious passion reflects an internalizing factor that motivates an individual to use the internet based on it providing stability in one's life. On the other hand, obsessive passion reflects more externalizing pressures, such as social acceptance or self-esteem, that perpetuate an individual's use. Now, with a firm understanding of what internet addiction is and its perceived underlying structures, it is important to move on to the major types of internet addiction and the avenues with which adolescents can funnel their urges and desires. Although the internet implies so many different things, there are some aspects that directly affect adolescents and that constitute the majority of their participation. These include excessive gaming, social networking, and finally, online pornography. Each of these unique subcomponents of the internet provides particular avenues in which adolescents can become overwhelmed or addicted. While going over these, it is important to consider how much of these components have progressed over time and how moving forward their influence will increase due to advances in modern technology. After understanding which aspects of the internet can consume adolescents, it is important to then move on and discuss the mitigating factors behind the addiction, and specifically those that influence adolescents the most. Once doing all of this, it'll be easier to identify the appropriate coping methods or therapy styles that can best serve in having the potential to reduce or eliminate such addictive behaviors. As many of you can probably relate, growing up, video games were one of the most amazing and futuristic inventions to be made available. I myself played video games and felt it was not only fun, but a time in which I was able to really connect and enjoy myself with friends and others. As many of you can agree, gaming is something that brings people together on such a large scale, and the emotions it can elicit help in captivating people to keep playing and enjoying them more and more. When it comes to internet addiction, online gaming can be seen as something that consumes people to the point where these virtual realities are more real than ever. With such captivation, excessive online gaming can be seen as revolving around three main aspects: the incentives they can provide, the rewards they may ultimately bear, and finally, the ways in which they can be maintained by the users. These incentives, rewards, and the maintenance that games can offer, especially during formative years leading up to earlier young adulthood, constitute significant and major processes that adolescents come to learn and deal with on a daily basis. Incentives present themselves in many different ways. However, the status one can gain from being successful in the gaming environment has been identified by research as an indicator of such persistent use. The reputation and admiration received from others who they play with and those in the online gaming community help to reinforce and bolster the adolescent's ego, which leads to continuous play. Much to the success of those who play online games, maintenance of such excessive game play has been seen as a result of the decreased feelings of adolescents' social abilities and belonging, as well as the lack of commonality shared with others offline. Gaming in this sense provides what they are otherwise not capable of getting in reality. As a result, excessive gaming has been seen as offering encouragement to some in being able to find some sort of connection with others and a place where everyone can fit in. Furthermore, the versatility of the games themselves help in fixating adolescents into a shared community with shared beliefs and practices that ultimately offer experiences of greater felt significance and meaning. Through such incentives to begin playing, as well as the maintaining factors that encourage adolescents to keep playing, the rewards that games can provide, whether emotional or tangible within the games themselves, have been linked to adolescents' overall abuse. Research has identified that the continued repetition of rewards received through games result in a more positive implicit attitude and in some cases a conditioned behavior. With the versatility that gaming offers, recent research has studied the creation of virtual worlds and the immersion put forth into online games, leading users to become addicted. As the progression of gaming has continued from just playing against the computer to playing against other people online, its evolution and having the ability to create your own personalized worlds can be seen as a fundamental aspect when it comes to being addicted. If you think about it, even such simple games like Boom Beach gives you the opportunity to shape and form your environment while keeping you engaged by giving you the ability to manipulate specific features. Among the different types of games, a certain class has been identified by research as more popular than others. Massive multi-user online role-playing games, or MMORPGs, have been considered one of the fastest-growing forms of internet addiction, especially among children and teenagers. MMORPGs are essentially gaming environments that have up to thousands of members in it playing all at the same time. Gaming motivations around these interactive settings allow players to not only achieve goals within the game, be social with other people playing it, immerse themselves even further into the game, but it also has the ability to be manipulated by the player's own interests and desires. These incentives alone not only help in encouraging excessive play, but also help and affirm its constant use. A final aspect when interpreting internet addiction through excessive gaming can be seen through the mental capacity of escapism. Escapism is the tendency to seek distraction or relief from something either unpleasant, the daily reality, or when indulging in such things as daydreaming or fantasy. If not obvious, gaming is something that allows adolescents to essentially live out these forms of escapism or fantasy that can otherwise not be lived out in reality. Not only does it involve mood modification, but gaming allows adolescents to avoid any real-life struggles they may be going through. Aside from fantasy, what is tangible that gaming offers is not only the fact it is legal, it is also convenient and inexpensive, and in some cases, something that can be considered constructive, allowing for the expression of oneself. As something that almost everyone can now relate to, social networking of any kind has become something of a standard or newfound normality in society that is participated in by the masses. From early forms such as instant messaging and MySpace to Facebook and Twitter, and now newer and more recent social media applications such as Instagram and Snapchat, it is easy to see how social networking has become one of the most popular and highly engaged in activities by people all over the world. As ashamed as I am to admit, I myself practically have my phone glued in my right hand at all times, whether it is looking at pictures on Instagram, checking emails, or sending text messages. Social networking is something that is part of my life and in some cases can consume it. For adolescents in today's society, these new forms of social media represent the foundation with which they will learn such tendencies to overuse, to then only later on establish excessive need to stay connected, which can lead to addiction. When it comes to internet addiction and social networking, research has identified that not only has participation in social networking been shown to have an impact on the perceived well-being of adolescents, it is also being mediated by their self-esteem. Two major hypotheses can help in explaining the relationship and mass appeal it represents to adolescents. The first is the social compensation hypothesis. This hypothesis describes the status felt by those who may be seen as more introverted or have lower self-esteem and use such forms of social media as an opportunity to either gain popularity or become more social. This hypothesis aims at identifying what adolescents lack or are inadequate in when it comes to being social. Social networking thus provides a way of compensating for this inexperience or lack of social exposure and connection with others without necessarily having to personally. In a way, this hypothesis describes the status felt by those who are able to essentially bridge a gap in their social inadequacies through such forms of social networking. How this compensation appeals then, or what it can offer, is a connectedness otherwise not felt or that may be lacking in an adolescent's offline life. The other form of reason behind internet addiction and social networking revolves around the social enhancement hypothesis. Rather opposite of social compensation, social enhancement describes the status felt by those who may be more outgoing and extroverted, who instead of using social networking as a means to compensate for the social skills lacking offline, they use it as an opportunity to become more popular or essentially enhance their status. This hypothesis states that adolescents who are already popular or have high social status will be more inclined to use social networking because it offers increased opportunity to become more popular. As obvious as it may seem, research has identified that a growing area of internet addiction has to do with online pornography and the participation in cybersexual activities. Whether it is shyness or the lack of interest in real-life intimacy, major personality changes and excessive lying to conceal the truth have been attributed to individuals' sexual internet addictions. Furthermore, research has found that online pornography offers adolescents easy access, the ability to remain anonymous, as well as customization of content type. This increased appeal to adolescents comes from the ability to experiment and explore anonymously. Research has also identified that adolescent imagination is increasingly stimulated from these computer-based fantasies, with excessive users not only feeling less accountable but protected from their actions, more so being encouraged to perform and live out fantasies not normally pursued in reality. This so-called invisible cloak with which adolescents feel hidden behind can identify a critical component of the beneficial factors the internet has to offer when it comes to online pornography. Seemingly, in everyday life, there are many things that can have an influence on the actions and decisions we make. The same goes for adolescents and whether or not they choose to use the internet appropriately. Although there may be many different factors that increase the likelihood of an adolescent becoming addicted to the internet, particularly parents, peers, education, and the individual characteristics of an adolescent have been identified in research as having more significant influence than others. If it is not already obvious, the role and influence parents have on children from birth and throughout the lifespan can implicate major health outcomes physically, mentally, and emotionally. When it comes to adolescent internet addiction, research has proposed that the relationships between the parents, as well as the relationships between the adolescents and parents, are key indicators leading up to a child's overall abuse of the internet. Furthermore, the parents' own behavior in regards to the internet, as well as the communication strategies they use with their children, whether it is about general information regarding the internet or the way to appropriately use the internet, has been seen as effectively stimulating the relationship between adolescents and excessive internet use. Recent research on the optimal bonding style of parenting, in which care and protection are provided but also respect for autonomy, has been seen to influence the internet and social networking use among adolescents. Research has thus highlighted the importance of parent mental health and its associations with adolescents' internet addiction. Parent mental health, and particularly depression, stress, and anxiety, are associated with an increased risk of adolescent internet addiction. This conceptualizes, then, the effects that parents' cognitive abilities can have on adolescents, and ultimately being able to project their own use onto their adolescents' use. When examining relationships, specifically, research looks at interparental conflict and adolescent parental conflict as mitigating relational factors that influence excessive internet use. Interparental conflict has been seen as a limiting agent in the amount of emotional resources parents can offer. This behavior in turn results in causing the adolescent to turn to the internet as a support system or emotional resource otherwise not found within the home. Other research highlights the adolescent parent conflict that may occur, which has been seen as another key indicator relating to internet addiction. Research has indicated that conflict going on between the adolescent and the parent causes an amount of unwillingness from the adolescent to adhere to any requested regulations of the internet from the parents. From this poor parent-child relationship and conflict, it can then lead to the adolescent feeling unwanted anxiety, which results in them turning to the internet as a form of emotional support and reinforcement. A final aspect of research has established parents' own behavior and communication with their child as a critical component of internet addiction. The positive or negative ways parents use the internet ultimately guides and facilitates the way adolescents evaluate using the internet as well. Children learn a great deal from what their parents can tell them, but children also have been known to learn a great deal from their parents' actions as well. When at an impressionable age, parents overuse the internet can come across to the child as normal or healthy. While parents have the most exposure with their children and are more or less the initial gateway to technology and the internet, close peers and friendships of adolescents have been seen to display significant forms of influence in the overall excessive use of the internet. Adolescents who are affiliated and closely associated with peers who they themselves are addicted are at an increased risk of becoming addicted as well. Research identifies deviant peer affiliation, social status, as well as peer group norms as ways in which adolescents may become addicted to the internet. Deviant peer affiliation can be associated as having interaction or connections with those who display or promote negative, risky online behaviors. Through these imposing peer relationships, peer pressure can assert internet addictive behaviors on adolescents using both intimidation and modeling techniques. Through these modeling techniques, adolescents have been sought out and are more likely to conform to peers of a higher social status. If behaviors of a high-status peer reflects heavy internet use, then most likely the adolescent will conform. Conformity also closely relates to the built-in group norms that adolescents immerse themselves into. Peer group norms reflect the normative qualities and behaviors that are not only accepted but imposed by everyone in the group. As a normal function of the associates an adolescent interacts with, heavy internet use may not seem as dangerous as it really is. As many might think, education and academics would be a source that more so offers a positive influence in an adolescent's overall internet use. While it does and can provide beneficial elements when used appropriately, research has identified ways in which the stress of academics can play a role in perpetuating the overall excessive use of the internet. Research uses the general strain theory, which seeks to explain negative emotions and problem behavior through the different levels of stress that may be presenting itself in an adolescent's life. Whether it be at home, in sports, or friends, these emotionally stressful events push adolescents to seek comfort in the internet. Academic stress has been noted as a more significant strain of stress in an adolescent's life that can ultimately lead to such negative emotions. In most countries, some sort of academic achievement standard exists with which children are held to in order to attain such advances in society, as well as gaining social status and wealth. Pressures from such standards can ultimately lead to negative emotions and problem behavior, which then, in turn, put adolescents at risk for turning to the internet to cope. Whereas many external factors can influence and increase the potential of an adolescent becoming addicted to the internet, there are many individual and personal factors as well that adolescents themselves can provide that further increase the likelihood of becoming addicted. Mainly pertaining to an adolescent's personality, social stability and security, as well as various biological aspects, adolescents can be seen as accumulating an abuse of the internet all on their own. Adolescents whose personalities more so resemble that of introverts have been found to be more susceptible to excessive internet use due to the lack of outward expression produced in reality. The internet caters to those who suffer from low self-esteem or self-worth in providing more control over the self-representation of the user. A major consequence, however, of this aspect of control of self-presentation is that it can socially isolate and confine adolescents, not only allowing them to function socially but interact with those offline. An approach to the individual factors that can lead up to an adolescent becoming addicted to the internet is research highlighting the reward deficiency syndrome. This has to do with hormonal regulation in the brain, and particularly the abnormal regulation of the amount of dopamine in the mesolimbic system. In accordance with the internet being identified as a reward system, adolescents' effort to receive enhanced stimulation from this reward center takes place through excessive use, which ultimately serves as a way in obtaining increased satisfaction as well as high production of the neurotransmitter dopamine. The overindulgence, then, of the internet has been seen as a way to overachieve the satisfaction and stimulation while also being able to constantly produce dopamine as a reward. Although the addiction and overall abuse of the internet may seem like enough of a consequence, such excessive use posits many other diminishing and detrimental health effects. Screen time and the increased exposure an adolescent constantly subjects themselves to has been seen as a significant health risk. Not only does this provide an opportunity of isolation from normal instances of social interaction, but it also facilitates a decreased interest or desire to participate in regular physical activity and proper amounts of exercise. Research has also found that some internet addicts stay up for more than 80 hours a week, resulting in not only a lack of sleep, but also an increased amount of restlessness and irregular body functioning. As an indicated influence in the likelihood of an adolescent becoming addicted to the internet, personality plays a major role. Research has found that abuse of the internet leads to increased shyness and low self-esteem. As a discussed consequence, when having control over self-representation, the internet leaves little opportunity for face-to-face interactions with others, ultimately encouraging those who lack such social inabilities to use it as a chance to compensate. Finally, the comorbidity or co-occurring features that surround mental health and internet addiction can be seen as major detrimental health outcomes. Excessive and abusive internet behavior has been linked to anxiety disorder, impulse control disorder, depression, as well as bipolar disorder. In accordance with the reward deficiency syndrome, as excessive use of the internet continues and reduces the amount of dopamine produced, this enables long-term recurrences of such mental disorders. As an opposing force against the unhealthy aspects excessive internet use can provide, some research has identified the potentially positive benefits behind internet addiction. Not only has research seen the internet facilitating an adolescent's ego identity, or the sense of who exactly that adolescent is and the abilities to act on that sense, but more importantly, with technology's advancement in today's society, the internet has been seen to foster particular skills relating to cognition and socialization. With a firm understanding of not only what internet addiction is, as well as which aspects captivate adolescents most, and finally the influences that increase the likelihood of becoming addicted to the internet, it is now important to go over the various treatment or therapy styles that can be seen as helping in order to alleviate or get rid of this issue. Although internet addiction is still fairly new to the professional and practicing realm, research has identified cognitive behavioral therapy, group therapy, brief strategic family therapy, and finally motivational interviewing as worthy coping mechanisms when dealing with internet addiction. Each of these sets of treatment not only seek to encourage the well-being of the individual suffering from internet addiction, but also those who surround them and have the opportunity to support and make a difference. Cognitive behavioral therapy, also known as CBT, seems to be one of the most popular and outspoken forms of therapy amongst research today. This style of therapy requires the individual to monitor their thoughts, identifying triggers that promote their addictive feelings, and replace them with appropriated coping styles that discourage continued urges. Furthermore, emphasis is placed on behavior management for both on and off computer behaviors. Despite lacking evidence, CBT treatments that are attended for even a short amount of time can be successful in reducing the frequent use of the internet as well as symptoms of internet addiction. When compared to other forms of psychological treatments, research found that CBT outperformed them in being able to reduce time spent online and depression. Furthermore, in an analysis of treatment effects on time spent online, depression, and anxiety symptoms, CBT for internet addiction was identified as the most successful form of treatment. Associations of successful CBT have been seen in correlation with how well individuals' prefrontal cortex is functioning. This is due to the fact that adapting the cognitive control it takes in using the internal thought process involves ability deriving from higher cognitive executive functioning. This style of therapy also helps in identifying obstacles individuals may face when trying to figure out alternative ways of spending time than being on the internet. For adolescents who may not have other interests in life, this provides an opportunity to create new activities that highlight their strengths. Finally, in accordance with the prefrontal cortex, I say that CBT is patient-dependent. This is due to the fact that its overall effectiveness is reliant on the prefrontal cortex of the patient suffering from internet addiction. CBT is predicated on strengthening a patient's overall cognitive control of their internet use, and if the integrity of the prefrontal cortex is compromised in any way, then the therapy may or may not result in any help. Family-based intervention has been regarded as one of the most thoroughly studied treatment options for adolescents suffering from substance dependence and addiction. Multi-family group therapy offers both adults and adolescents the advantages of a peer group, which can ultimately help them in getting the proper support. Multi-family group therapy provides the opportunity for improved parent-adolescent communication and closeness. Compared with non-addicts, adolescents with internet addiction have poor communication with their parents and are more likely to receive rejection and negative feedback from their parents. Multi-family group therapy emphasizes improving family cohesion and motivation to change within the family. It not only focuses on the parent-adolescent interactions, but also values the style and strength of attachment between other family members. Participation of other family members can supply a more supportive environment that ultimately encourages and values behavioral changes in the individual suffering from internet addiction. Emphasis within this type of therapy is on family cohesion and stability in an attempt to fulfill the child's lacking psychological needs. Fulfillment of psychological needs through the internet has been proposed as an internal motive in adolescents' internet addiction. This treatment aims at getting the child to understand the support that they have from others and the resources they have to turn to around them. Displaying access to alternative forms of support could ultimately help in reducing the reliance on the internet for fulfilling their needs. Closely related to multifamily group therapy, brief strategic family therapy is a type of treatment aimed to be short-term while seeking to eliminate or merely reduce any associative behavioral problems that coincide with an adolescent's problematic internet use. One of the most important techniques used in this style of treatment and therapy is reframing. Reframing essentially sets out to create an entirely new sense of reality for the family members, providing the opportunity to interpret their actions from a different point of view, in hopes of possibly pointing out any inadequacies in the relationship that already influence such discouraged behavior. Ideally, through this family-focused intervention style, it implores the use of three other major techniques: joining, diagnosing, and finally restructuring. Joining involves forming a coalition with all family members in wanting to change the adolescent's behavior. This views the family as an entire organism. In doing so, it implies that they function as a result of interrelated and interdependent cohesive parts. Once an individual has established a relationship with everyone in the family, a therapist will then step in to join the family system and facilitate a new therapeutic system of recovery. Diagnosing identifies the interactional or structural patterns that allow or perpetuate the excessive abuse. In essence, diagnosis determines the overall nature and character of the family interactions and what contributing factors the family fails to complete in addressing their child's problematic use of the internet. Finally, restructuring simply implies reformulating the interactive family patterns associated with the problematic behavior. The ultimate goal is to modify the specific family interactions that help in maintaining the unwanted excessive behavior and replacing them with more adaptive options that discourage such negative overuse. Motivational interviewing, much like cognitive behavioral therapy, seeks to motivate the patient in identifying something they want to change about themselves. This change would ultimately be their tendencies to need and excessively use the internet. Furthermore, once identifying the behavior that the individual would like to change, they are then encouraged to approach the uncertainty of challenging the issue by making a decision to build a firm commitment to changing this unwanted behavior. This style of therapy seeks to elicit positive and self-motivating statements for patients, encouraging them to evaluate the costs and benefits of such excessive internet abuse. From a goal-oriented approach, patients under this treatment style who are suffering from internet addiction eventually develop healthy coping mechanisms and come to find ways in which they see the internet as both useful and non-useful to them. Although parents may not be able to fully monitor or choose whether or not their children use or get exposed to the internet, there are some simple yet general guidelines they can follow in order to reduce the likelihood or perhaps postpone such abusive tendencies. The first is setting appropriate time limits when it comes to using the internet. Nowadays, it is not uncommon to go into a supermarket and see a parent with their child, and the child is either holding the parent's iPhone or they have their own iPad and they are completely immersed in it. Although it is a good distraction for the parents to use while they shop, it is important when not needing these distractions to establish clear time limits with their child, helping to not only facilitate appropriate amounts of play, but also serve as a way of making sure they get proper amounts of other healthy activities in during the day. Next is when choosing games or applications for children to use, try and make them educational. So many different education websites now offer gaming sections that not only children enjoy, but help them in further understanding and practicing important, knowledgeable, and educational concepts for the future. Having the ability to persuade children to play games that stimulate their overall learning potential will also serve in promoting their self-esteem and achieving abilities within school. The third piece of advice is to change the power source. What draws children into games and the internet is the sense of power that can be felt. Not only the power of choice, but being able to have the power to carry out fantasies otherwise forbidden in reality. Finding a healthy and alternative way for this power to be felt, possibly through sports, can help in guiding adolescents away from those power-drawing effects felt from the internet. The final piece of advice for parents is to look for a school connection that might relate to the child that will ultimately help the child become less interested in using the internet so much. Getting children to engage in more school-associated activities may help in promoting their self-esteem in different ways other than through the internet. Although still a relatively new and growing concern for researchers, internet addiction can provide many different facets with which future research should take into consideration. Research should focus on educating the public as well as professionals about the seriousness of internet addiction and the underlying issues facing those who suffer from it. Not only will this help in making people more aware, but it will also allow the chance for those who may seem afraid of seeking treatment to get the help they need. On a professional level, it would also allow the opportunity to offer the best help, guidance, and treatment possible. Furthermore, research should concentrate on the developing comorbidities with disorders that individuals who are addicted can develop. Educating and providing knowledge to parents while their children are young could have an immense impact on whether or not they grow up to develop these types of coexisting disorders. Research indicates that evaluating the causality of the relationship between neurobiological alterations and neurostructural abnormalities due to internet gaming addiction would further help in identifying mental health concerns within the addiction overall. Another aspect of future research could consider the increasing ability adolescents will have in gaining access to the internet, and particularly online pornographic content. Resolving where and how these promiscuous behaviors are first initiated and maintained could ultimately serve and help in preventing adolescents from further developing sexually risky behaviors. Finally, I think that future research considerations can establish a clear-cut diagnostic criterion for internet addiction that would further benefit professionals in being able to identify and treat patients properly. Being able to reference a clear understanding of symptoms, diagnosis, and treatment would be a critical element in not only helping patients, but altering treatments in the future to produce the most beneficial results. It is my hopes in this presentation that you take away these main points regarding internet addiction. First, the internet's use can yield both positive and negative benefits if not monitored properly. Second, addiction can manifest itself through different yet appealing components. Third, family and social influences have significant impact on adolescents' internet addiction. And finally, treatment and therapy, while still new, can offer healthy coping alternatives for adolescents with internet addiction. Thank you again for taking the time to listen and view this presentation. I hope it was worthwhile and you found the information important.